welcome to the channel. Today, I want to do a little exploration video showing how to turn the Nibbler, which is a accumulator and 4-bit shift register, into a sound processor and bit scrambler that will track and process audio signals. The way that this works is using an analog to digital converter to take some analog waveform and convert it into a set of bits, a digital representation of that analog waveform. And then, once it's in the digital realm, it can be processed, transformed, mixed around in fun ways, and then converted back using digital to analog conversion. There are precedents for this process of going there and DAC again that you might be familiar with. The Dresno and the Leibniz binary subsystem from Chaos Devices. Also, the bitfold from Schlappy Engineering is all about creating a digital representation of the waveform in order to transform it in interesting and beautiful ways, and then convert it back to analog to mix back into the rest of the system. But it's possible to do it with just the Nibbler and a few little utilities, and that's what I have on hand today, and that's what we're going to be exploring. The Nibbler does the digital to analog conversion process already very well. It has 4 bits that it will count up through or keep as its memory in its shift register, and it has a stair-stepped output, which is an analog representation of that count, that 16 bits. But how do you get a signal into the Nibbler? How do you take any old signal, for example, a sine wave from the angle grinder here, and how do you make a digital representation of it to store in these bits so that we can reconvert it back to analog, go through the mirror world and back again? Well, there are many ways to do this. There are so many different approaches to analog to digital conversion. They all have different trade-offs, and a lot of them are a little bit beyond my understanding in the technical world, and also require quite a few things in order to do. Quite a few components in order to do, I mean. But we can do it simply, and doing it simply results in a wonky, lo-fi, sort of beautiful way of doing it. And so the Nibbler is a counter. It's very good at counting up. And so if we take the Nibbler and clock it from a high-speed external source, in this case, the interstellar radio, listening to, let me unplug this so we can hear the clock whine that we have here. So that lovely high frequency is the interstellar radio running as fast as it can go. And that is our clock. And at every step of that clock, we count up with the Nibbler. We take that count that we're generating, going up towards 15, and we compare it against our target waveform, in this case, that sine wave. And when our count exceeds our target waveform, we flip a switch on the Nibbler, the subtract input here. And instead of counting up, we start counting down. And when we get below the target waveform, we start counting up again. And so if we count up to the waveform, and then we try and stay at the waveform for its entire curve, if we do that fast enough, if we get enough cycles per our target waveform, we can approximate that waveform. It sounds like this, compared to our sine wave input here. Lovely. We're getting somewhere. We have a way of taking any input, in this case our sine wave, tracking it with the Nibbler, and then creating a new representation of it with the digital to analog conversion, where we get that stair-stepped output from the Nibbler. And now in this case, I just want to note, I'm talking about using a comparator. In this case, I don't even have a separate comparator in the system that would work for this setting. So in this case, instead of using a comparator, I'm just taking the output of the nibbler, subtracting the target waveform from it, and then running that through a logic circuit, which triggers when it's above 0, a comparator, if you will. And so to trace the patch here, the nibbler is clocked by an external source. The count of the nibbler is going up by 1 every count here. This is getting offset in order to bring the nibbler output from a unipolar 0 to 10 volt down to a +5 to -5 volt range so that it's comparable to a bipolar waveform. That output is what we listen to as our output here, but it's also what we subtract our target signal from on the pink cable here. So we have nibbler output minus the pink output, and the result of that is going just into a little OR logic gate here, which is acting as our comparator, and the comparator output is running down to the subtract switch, which flips the nibbler from counting up to counting down and back to counting up. And if we left it here, this would be a neat little exercise, but this is the gateway to something much more exciting, which is what the bitfold or the Dresno or any of these conversion there and DAC again systems are doing. Because we can now start messing with the system. We can do bit crushing, bit manipulation. We can modulate our representation and make it less perfect and more delightful, strange, beautiful. So starting with the simplest ways of doing this, we can count up by more than 1. If we count by 3, or 2, or 6, 4, 5, we can start to change the timbre a little bit, and also do a form of bit reduction on the waveform because we have less steps to represent the waveform. I'm going to start a sequence running. The sequence is just clocking the angle grinder. It's just controlling the frequency on the angle grinder, but because we're tracking that, we're going to hear it on the nibbler here. And just here's that same sequence on the angle grinder. I can't exactly explain what's going on, but by flipping off the sync and going off of the clock, the subtract switch is going to be, our comparator is going to be adjusting the way that bits are shifting around independent of the clock speed, and this gets noisy and distortive in a really fun way as well. Especially once we start reducing the bits on them. And that's a really cool distortion type of sound that we could get when we engage the async on that, so that the bits are sort of moving around as the subtraction switch is flipping independent of the clock speed. It sort of plays against the clock and sort of tracks the waveform in a slightly, maybe theoretically cheaty sort of way, but in one that produces very fun distortive results. Another really quick thing that we can do here is reduce the sample rate. By decreasing the clock, we are decreasing the speed at which we are counting up and down, which is effectively a form of sample rate reduction on our waveform. I'm going to open the filter back up. And we can get that sample rate reduction by reducing the clock speed at which we're counting on the nibbler. Another fun thing that we can do is, because one of the reasons I chose this counting up way, because it maps so well to what the nibbler does, it leaves all of these patch points on the nibbler open. And that means that we can use those to further manipulate and do like bit swapping type of things. So if I take this output here, and I take the individual output for bit 2, run that into gate 4, maybe take 4, run it back into 2. I'm going to re-engage the async. Can also take an external source, like an LFO here from the sport modulator, and manipulate bits individually that way in order to jostle things around in the digital representation more. Lots more opportunities to mess with the signal and get it really distortive and fun and messed up. Now, instead of processing the angle grinder, I want to go ahead and we'll keep this patch where it's at right now and try a different source, because we could take the same thing that we have here, and I'm going to run my microphone into the system, and we can listen to that instead of the angle grinder. So now, instead of tracking a sine wave from the angle grinder, we are tracking a more complicated signal that is my voice. Test 1, 2. Yeah, that looks good. So one thing to note with this is that when I'm not saying anything, we're just going to hear the sort of the clock whine, and especially as we start to garble things a little bit, we're going to just hear that chaos without the voice as something to track. And so I might at times put a gate on the sound. This is something that if you have a noisy processing, using a gate from your external source such that it tracks and only opens up when you're speaking is a way to do that. We could actually patch that up here. So and what I'm going to do is, I forget if I mentioned or not, I have the output of the nibbler running through a low-pass filter here, and I can use that to sort of like quiet down the clock whine a little bit. Let me pull these out. Okay, so there's the clock whine, and with the sort of like best tracking possible, this is me talking into the nibbler. I can bring down the low pass filter in order to bring out some of that high end. I could even use the envelope follower that I have here to open the filter back up a little bit just when I'm talking. And how's that? Let's try something like that maybe. Maybe even add, let's not worry about any resonance, so we're just hearing the nibbler. I can just hear the clock line there. So let's play around with something like this. We could also use a VCA. Envelope to VCA. The output of the filter is going to go into the VCA here. And even if we open this back up now, we are using the envelope from from my voice, from the microphone, to control the signal. And hopefully this gets still a nice treatment of what we're listening to. So little patching distraction aside, you can process more complex sources using a system like this. You could do an instrument, you could do your voice, you could do samples, drums, and especially if you start to gate it or use the envelope of that input signal to control some of the chaos that you get out of it, not the chaos, the noise that you get out of it, then that lets you work with it. Let's try and make this a little... Okay, yeah. Now we're getting a fun voice processing here. I'm just gonna patch some of these things around, and let's bring this back down as an LFO and run that into gate 2. So now I can bring that up, and this is a strange processing of my voice. So, as I said at the start of this video, there are dedicated modules for this sort of there and DAC again process. Things that will take your signal, convert it to the digital realm, do some sort of processing to it, and bring it back. But I wanted to share this one because, one, I don't have any of those other modules. I think they're really cool, but I'm working with a limited collection of tools here. And I end up learning things by exploring what I have and finding ways to make it do things that are a little bit outside the box. But more importantly than what I have or what I don't have, the sound that I get from doing it this way with the Nibbler, this sort of weird lo-fi, open-ended patch for this digital processing, it's going to sound different than any other way of doing it. The roughness and weirdness of the Nibbler is, for me, part of the charm in the way that this sound processing works. And there are opportunities here to be creative in the way that you patch up a system like this. And through that creativity, I think that there are opportunities to be expressive and to be delightful or surprising. And I think this is perhaps a great idea to end on. You can treat the tools that you have as an invitation to be creative. When you look for ways to get new behavior or functionality out of the equipment that you have, you can end up in new, weird sonic worlds. And you can learn a thing or two along the way. I ended up learning a lot about analog to digital conversion that I probably wouldn't have learned otherwise if I hadn't had to figure out how to do this with the Nibbler for myself. So thanks for watching. Thanks for following along with this weird exploration. And I hope you have fun in your explorations with what you have.